Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Electric Underground Podcast, now with some video elements. Joining me today are the developers of Schildmaid MX, Mikhail and Hans. Welcome to the show, my dudes.
Thanks a lot.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
And for those who do not know, you guys have some history even before this episode that you're reminding me of, where you guys were on the Kane and Rinse podcast quite a long time ago. And I know Mikhail's been a long time listener to the podcast, which is always really cool.
Yeah, for sure. Can't believe I'm on it this time for the first time.
Yeah.
So,
is that a weird experience?
Is there going to be a SoundCloud upload?
There's going to be on Spotify now. I moved from SoundCloud to Spotify because SoundCloud took so much freaking money out of my pocket for their hosting fees, and basically they're not a great platform for podcasts, and Spotify is free. So I moved you will be on Spotify, the new era. You're part of the new era of the podcast on Spotify and whatever else I can get it on there.
Yeah.
Feeling like a Zoomer here.
Exactly, yes. And so I wanted to get a little bit of a background on you two as developers before making this game, kind of how you came into it.
Yeah, well, shall I take it, or do you want to take it, Hans?
Go ahead, Mikhail.
You go ahead. I'll comment on it later.
Yeah, so I'll keep it really short. I was working at Nintendo of Europe in an online content sort of profession, and there I met Hans. I'm Dutch, he's German. And we hit it off really well, especially we're playing a lot of fighting games together, and we stayed friends. And at one point I just got this stupid idea, like I want to start a game development venture. And I shared my idea with Hans, and he was on board, which was good because I don't have any programming skills, and he has. I just have a lot of ideas, I'm the idea guy between the two of us. Yeah, so we started working together, and it was really fun. It sounds a bit schmaltzy, but it's kind of like a journey of discovery. Like when you're just a player of video games and you just love them, you start looking at them quite naturally in a very different way once you start making them yourself, and or attempting to at first, at least. And yeah, it's this thing where, first of all, you start to realize how incredibly multidisciplinary making a video game is. You got people that need to write music for it. You got people that make graphics. You got people such as myself that sort of create the general rule set and the the lead overall design, and maybe write some story lore, some background lore for it. You got people, of course, that have to do the programming and 2D art, all that stuff. So it's really quite a miracle how a project like that has to come together. And especially since we are working with a bit of a team, it's not just one person doing everything, and make it all something cohesive in the end as well. So yeah, we did that. I think we started dabbling in 2013 or something. We were experimenting with doing some RTS stuff and infusing them with arcade game elements. But we never really got far, and these projects really started becoming way too overgrown and bloated and ambitious. Right. And then I think it was last year, right? Yeah, last year we had this. Hans was working on some prototypes and some movement in Unity, and we had the idea. Okay, let's try to make a very simple kind of shmup in this field. And the thing is, I never wanted to make a shmup because I thought the likes of Cave and Treasure and G-Ref had already sort of hemmed up the genre. Like, okay, these guys are masters at it. I'm not going to touch that. I love shoot 'em up games, but I'm not going to touch that because they already have so many years of experience and are so far ahead. But I always had this little idea in the back of my mind, which formed the core mechanic of what Schildmaid is. Only it was very rudimentary and it was a little bit undercooked, but we just decided to go for it, and that's how Schildmaid turned out.
Because I didn't have that knowledge that Mikhail has, that in-depth knowledge about shmups. That's why I didn't have those reservations. I just went ahead and made something, and that's where that came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of funny where it's like if you're really casual into the genre of shmups, you can kind of sort of underestimate their complexity and be like, isn't that like baby's first game is a shmup? And then if you're really deep into the genre of shmups, you're like, oh, this is way too much to handle. I'd rather just make something easy like a platformer or something. It's just funny depending on your sort of view of the genre. Because I remember when I was learning a little bit about just game deving on Game Maker a long time ago, like all the tutorials were like, easy first game, and it's some dude making like an asteroids type thing, Like,
you're right. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, the thing is,
there probably are no really easy to make games for any genre, right? As soon as you get into it, complexity emerges from all sides. That's just how it goes. That's why I was not very intimidated by shmups, because I didn't have that deep knowledge, right? Now I have a lot more knowledge, and of course that also helps me to appreciate what's already there, and all those masterful games that already do exist.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, kind of get a timeline of when Schildmaid began and like the time scale here, because it feels like it was pretty quick, but I may be off there.
Yeah.
No, you're right. It was pretty quick. As Michiel said, it started out with a small prototype. I just had this idea of making a certain type of character movement thing in Unity. It had nothing to do with shmups. And then I thought, hey, this would lend itself well to a shmup. And then I just built this super crude prototype that really had no gameplay whatsoever. But once we saw that and we started talking about shmups a little bit, that's when Michiel's ideas that he had already cultivated earlier came into that. And that was, it was last year, right? It was pretty quick to come together. But of course, that the current situation of the world also played into that a lot. Like all of a sudden, everybody had much more free time,
right? Yeah,
to work on quote unquote hobby projects.
Yeah,
which was not the case before. We work in full-time jobs, and that really didn't give us much space to develop games. But as soon as we, got that sudden influx of spare time. All of a sudden we did have time to work on something more than just a hobby, Yeah.
And it really made all the difference that once we put my idea into the prototype, and it was immediately fun from the beginning.
That's good time.
It was immediate, even without any kinds of stage design. So let me walk it back a little bit. Like the idea I originally had was I've always been fascinated with the Super Nintendo version of Area 88 or UN Squadron with that weird, funky health system they have in there,
Yes.
Like, it has that, like, you get hit, then you enter danger mode. If you get hit again during danger mode, you die. But if you survive through that, then you can continue on with a diminished health bar, that thing. And I had this idea, like, all right, maybe, what if there was a shoot 'em up where the aim is to get hit, so you enter a brief invulnerability period that carries you through like unsurvivable situations otherwise. It was real puzzle-like almost, Ikaruga-like.
Yeah, it's a very unique concept because like that sort of idea I don't think's ever really been done in a shmup, as far as like getting, like, you want to get hit to activate these sort of like hyper shield mode thing. Like that's a very unique idea. I've never come across that before.
Yeah, and so the whole thing was, okay, so you want to get hit to get a brief invincibility period, like iframes or whatever, and then afterwards you have to deal with the danger period that comes afterward that makes you extra vulnerable before you can recover again. But I think, and then I had these images in my mind of like impenetrable laser barriers that force you to get hit by a bullet so you could pass through the laser barriers, Mm-hmm. But it was just so rudimentary. I thought like, okay, well, is that all that there is to it? So I never really fleshed it out beyond that. Like I have a whole like file with all sorts of game concepts, So I just left it there. But then we tried to work with that again, and sort of without really fleshing it out further, build on it. So the invincibility period or the iframes became an actual shield. So then, it becomes this cycle of going through shield, danger, and then neutral state again, like these 3 shifting dynamics. And once we had that in there, that was already quite a lot of fun. And then, we started incorporating the bullet absorption mechanic to power up your ship with, rather than having floating power-up icons on screen.
Yes.
And then we started... What if there would be a way to extend your shield time, like then the whole chaining, like shield chaining thing. So it started layering on and on and on and on. And then at one point, also we had this whole thing. Okay, now your ship is in max power, but what do? Why you don't have any reasons to absorb more bullets anymore? So then we had the max power state, or the golden bullets. So it became more score-driven, the gameplay as well. And even without having any sort of stage designs really built around it, we just had some random Zaco crypt from NES Gradius in there. Even without that, it was already just really fun. That constantly shifting dynamic all the time, which, depending on how you manage it, makes stages quite different from, depending on your actions. Like, where are you? Are you in neutral right now? Are you in shield state right now? Are you in danger state right now?
I can definitely share some videos of that first prototypes with you. They're really funny to look at.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll clip them into this conversation. What it kind of reminds me of, I've been thinking about it all day, is it kind of reminds me a bit of if you combined chaining in Dodonpachi with like hyper. So you because when you're in your shield and you keep the chain going, it like keeps your hyper going. So it'd be like if you're playing Dodonpachi and you could just extend your hyper by continuing to chain. And I thought, that's a really cool idea. Then I thought, why hasn't anyone really done this before? Because that seems like a really cool idea. Like, keep that hyper going by keeping the chain alive.
Yeah, man, I'd love for our game to inspire other developers in turn again, and they start, running with that as well. I was watching Twilight EX stream the game recently, and he had some really smart remarks as well. He said, like, usually chaining is just reserved for score only, but in this game, chaining keeps you alive, and that's also a crucial difference.
I think that's a big deal.
Yeah,
like there's a lot to that it's kind of like a puzzle piece in that equation of chaining for survival versus chaining for score, where in stuff like Dodonpachi, chaining for score is almost always opposing survival because it's always more dangerous. But in this game, it kind of combines it together, where you want to chain for score, but it also keeps you alive. It's a really cool combination. Yeah,
and I personally really like it when scoring and survival go kind of hand in hand,
Yes.
Like, up to a certain degree, and then there need to be that risk factor. Like, okay, how do you really want to push it to really obtain the ridiculous scores?
Yes. And I'm just waiting for, as the game gets more explored, for like the wild strategies and maneuvers to come out, which I'm sure they will. Where someone finds some kind of really crazy players suicide already. Setups or something.
Yeah. We got some, because one thing we're very lucky with. I mean, there's the whole music aspect as well. Like, when I always wanted to work together with Ed of Bullet Heaven because I loved what he did musically. So we got him very early on as well, and his music was so good that we wanted to step up the graphics for the game as well. That's why we went kind of all out there as well. Before, it was supposed to be a real simple mini game, And then we fairly early on got people into tests as well, ranging from just friends to more seasoned Schildmaid players to complete newbies, a fairly big mix of people. And some people in our group of testers got really obsessed with the game and really into it and really into the scoring, especially one player called Steak Eater, who is topping all the leaderboards currently still. He's just...
And by an extremely wide margin.
Extremely wide margin, yeah. And he pretty much has like these ridiculous high-level tactics of where he leaves all the enemies that fire bullets at you alive as far as that's possible, and then only chain kills the enemies that fire missiles or lasers, for example.
Starts
that
milking
sort of thing.
them and stuff.
Exactly. So when you see him play, you just see it's like his ship is a magnet. It attracts all the aimed bullets on screen, and he just sits in certain spaces. And he spawn kills like the suicide bullet Zako, so that he can eat up all the 3 bullets that fly in 3 different directions all at once before they fly off, and that's that sort of thing. So yeah, but to get there, that takes actual stage memorization.
Yeah.
Survival-wise, it's not super memo heavy our game is, but once you get into that sort of scoring level, yeah, it takes a lot of memorization.
Right. Yeah, when I was playing it for survival, it didn't feel too strict as far as you needing to totally memorize the game, which is pretty impressive because when you go for that older styles, this is kind of like a hybrid, definitely, but it does still have some older style stage and level design. And a lot of those games are just very memorization heavy, like Blazing Star, R-types, and all those types of things. Like, you just kind of need to know what's happening. Yeah. Otherwise, some bullet's going to spawn on top of your head.
I've been trying to get it clear on Gradius 5, and that's super memorization heavy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, we definitely tried to keep the difficulty a bit lower for survival purposes, but then up it if you want to score well. So, for example, for all the boss fights, the shared concept between all of them is killing the boss is not that hard, but killing the boss with an active shield, which nets you the multiplier for the boss kill, which is super important for scoring, is kind of hard because you have a limited amount of cannons on the bosses that shoot bullets that you can activate your shield off.
Yeah.
So most of them, they have like 3 cannons. That means you have 3 shield activations, and if you waste them too early and then you lose your shield before you kill the boss, you're not getting that fat multiplied score. But just getting the kill is not that hard.
Yeah, once you figure it out, the real big bosses in the game might throw you for a bit of a loop when you first have to fight them, but once you figure them out, they're not that hard to kill.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you a bit about, have you found any sort of crazy milking issues with bosses? Like, has the meta gotten to where people are like milking the bosses a bunch, or is it more desirable to speed kill them, or anything like that cropped up during your testing?
Yeah, a lot of that, that's why it was so good that we had testers like that early on. And also seeing somebody like Steak Eater sort of really develop this high-level meta early on has allowed us to already balance the game on that level fairly early on as well.
Right.
Which goes for milking, so many times we had to sort of put in countermeasures in the game to stop excessive milking.
Right.
Because milking is fun to a certain extent, but you don't want the game to completely slow down to a grinding halt because of it, right?
Exactly.
So there is room to milk, but you have to sort of optimize your milking in the time that you have to kill them. With the regular end of stage bosses, for example, the timeout, with the mini bosses and then the big bosses, like Hans said, there's just so much you can milk from them, because every time you activate his shield, you destroy, with the shield counter mechanic that's in there, you destroy the cannon that fired those bullets. So you just have to really optimize it there as well.
And I was reading through the wiki, and it said something about rank. How does the rank in the game work exactly?
Yeah, there's rank. Initially we didn't have it, but I also came to the conclusion that shoot 'em ups without rank often can become quite dull and static, It's just, the set difficulty, that's it, and nothing ever changes in the stages. So it's not too crazy. We're not talking Garega levels here. It's just like, and for me, I think rank is really important, but from a balancing perspective, I think it's also important that you don't go full Yagawa and make the rank only rise. I think it needs to go 2 ways. It needs to ensure that as a player you have always a certain amount of friction in the game that's right for you. If you do really well, if you just don't die, the game needs to throw you more of a challenge, right? Because you can obviously handle it. But if you lose a lot of lives, the game should also go a little bit easier on you. So what happens is it's really simple. During a stage, the rank can never go up. It's just clocks. Okay, did you complete the stage? with a no miss, then the rank will go up by a difficulty factor of 2. But if you die during a stage, the rank can actually go down during the stage. And every time you die, it drops by 1 level. So if you have a decent run going on, the rank will definitely increase. But yeah, like a couple of deaths during the stage can also quite significantly lower it again.
Yeah, we also balanced it differently for the different modes. So for Jäger mode, which is kind of the beginner mode, the easy mode, rank can go down to negative values actually. So you start out with was it 5 lives?
Yeah.
And if you every time you lose a life, it'll go down. So you can go to like 80% rank or something. Whereas in the later mode, in Krieger mode, which is like the arcade mode or normal difficulty mode, it can never go down below the initial values.
Right.
And then for example, there's Chimera mode, which is not hard mode. It's like a range completely different. You have this overpowered ship, but no extents. Rank will only rise by definition because once you die, you're game over.
That's cool. That's a cool idea.
And yeah, rank influences certain factors like cooldown on enemies firing, so they will start firing faster volleys of bullets at you. Bullet speed, enemy movement speed will be affected. Enemy HP as well, but that's for obvious reasons gets just incrementally higher. It doesn't really rise that much even at max rank, just enough so you don't just one-shot everything at one point.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
This map scroll speed also
that's
increases.
True, yeah.
That's
so
cool.
the game can
the
become
game
pretty
literally
fast.
goes faster.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, you'll notice because you start at a higher rank. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I've always wondered if that could be sort of an interesting speedrun mechanic, because everyone always talks about, shmups, they suck because you can't speedrun them or whatever, like more normal people. And I always thought, wouldn't it be interesting if, I think they kind of did this a little bit with the Zero Ranger arrange, but wouldn't it be interesting if you had a shmup where as the rank goes up, the game actually goes faster, and it sounds like that's what your game does. It starts going faster.
A little bit, yeah, definitely.
That would be interesting.
You'll notice a difference in scroll speed because Chimera mode starts at a higher rank. If you just play the first stage of Jäger mode, it's all fairly lethargic, and then if you jump into Chimera mode, you'll definitely notice that things are definitely moving faster here.
So what I wanted to ask about too is your guys' loop system in the game, because I thought that was pretty interesting and unique, and I didn't feel like I fully understood how the loop system worked.
Yeah, the thing was we wanted to, instead of working on a project for years and years, we wanted to release something we could, or make something we could release fairly quickly. So we just thought okay, let's just do 3 stages. And initially I wanted to go full on early 80s old school arcade like Donkey Kong, like just 3-4 stages that loop endlessly, and there would actually be no end to the game. And we walked back quite a lot from that initially, lots of discussions with Hans and with a lot of our testers, and I had to compromise there, or I had to admit that it was probably better to have other than
your opinion was objectively wrong, and
exactly.
Sorry, your opinion's wrong. Yes, please, no more infinitely looping shmups for everyone's sanity. Because then you're going to have some poor snake eater type guy sitting there for 12 hours like, oh my God. It's just a test of endurance by the end.
Yeah, and so the loop system, we still had these sort of 3 visual stage themes, right? But, and what it comes down now is that you have to play 3 loops of those 3 stages, so 9 stages in total. But every loop is... the stages use sort of similar visual assets, but they introduce new enemies, and the layouts are quite significantly different.
Yeah.
A loop is... They're pretty much 9 unique stages, only reusing assets, or reusing visual themes at least.
You know what it kind of reminds me of a bit is like Cho Run Sha, but a little bit more. You know how like Cho Run Sha has like 1 stage? Like,
one continuous stage. Yeah.
Well, it's like one background basically, and then it just uses. But they're like different enemy patterns and stuff. Yeah, but
exactly. Yeah.
I always thought like, what if Cho and Shaw had like 3 different ones instead of having to do just the one? So I think it was good that you like varied it a little bit, and that was interesting when I was playing and sort of just going through the loops, because I did kind of lose track of like, okay, what stage is what and where, but it didn't feel weird. It felt like it felt natural in a way that was hard to explain. Like, it didn't feel like you were playing through the same stages at all, but it also didn't feel like it was all that clear what stages were what, because in some shmups like in Dodonpachi, for example, like the backgrounds of the stages are so different from one another. It's like, okay, now it's very clear what stage you're on. So
yeah, and if you go back to those old school horrors that we pretty much modeled the base design of, like your Gradiuses and your R-types, of course, every stage had a very clear visual identity there.
Some of them, though, like Life Force, I mean, it's like, you're in some kind of body of some type. I can't remember what stage is what in that game.
yeah.
Another thing we started doing with the loops, that was a bit later into testing. So at first we had 5 loops, and then we cut down the game a bit for length. We didn't want a single session to be like over an hour long. So we decided to reduce it to 3 loops. But what you can then do is, if you're playing well enough, you can choose which loop to go to. So you can go 1, 2, 3 and then face the last boss, or you can go 1, 3, 4 or 1, 3, 5 or 1, 2, 4.
So there's hidden loops.
Basically, yes. So what you need to do is, when you kill the mini boss of the 3rd stage with an active golden shield, you get 2 portals to choose from. And so you can basically skip a loop, which nets you a higher multiplier bonus as well.
Oh,
and of course,
so that's the reason for the portal system at the end of the stage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
that's cool.
Loops 4 and 5 are quite a bit harder than if you just go 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. So you can even
course,
make the
scoring
easy mode
potential is higher as well.
Yeah. So even the easy mode you can make quite spicy if you start skipping to the higher loops. Loop 5 in Jaeger mode is pretty challenging.
That's cool.
Yeah,
I did find the game nice and challenging. Like, I wasn't just sitting there breezing through it, just snoring my way through. No, I felt like, okay, this game's cooking. This game's moving. This game's got some legs under it, which I really appreciated a lot, because when I play horizontal shmups, sometimes they can be real rough experiences for me, because it just feels like you're just floating around. You're like, all right, any day now. And I have this sort of test that I do where I just leave the ship in the middle of the screen and I just hold the fire button. I'm like, okay, if I can get away with this for more than like 3 or 4 seconds, that's a problem. But not in the case of Shield. I was moving around constantly, and especially since you were always chasing after, trying to keep that chain going and trying to point blank everything as it appears on screen. Yeah,
and you've mainly played with the Wyvern ship as well, right? With the red ship.
Yes, that's
so that is actually the expert ship that forces you to chase a lot around the screen.
Yes,
so the other 2 ships have homing missiles, and they allow you to sort of choose your position on the screen a little bit more, because you can just let your homing missiles do a lot of the work.
But you're still going to be chasing after missiles, of course. After bullets.
Yeah,
and I think the lasers help break it up too, because if you're hanging out in the middle of the screen, you're going to get hit in the face with a laser pretty quick.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. I had this whole sort of dynamic in mind, like, okay, you've got a shield now, so bullets are a lot of the time no longer an issue. So there needs to be other things that threaten you. So lasers interact with your shield in that if you fly through a laser with your shield, you won't die, but it will sap your shield duration quite significantly. But even there's a grace period after your shield expires, so it will never happen that even if your shield is almost expired, you fly through a laser, you won't die, because you have some iframes after your shield expires. So you can shield through lasers if you have to, but of course you don't want to let them, have them lose your shield if it's not necessary.
Yeah, unless of course you're Steak Eater and you intentionally lose your shield to get better chains later on, which is quite cool as well.
Right. Yeah. And has he haven't developed any sort of suicide strats yet, or is that a thing at this point?
Not suicide strats, but losing shield intentionally to lasers. That's the thing, yeah.
I could see that, yeah. I could see as I was playing, like, oh, there's a lot of juice here for all kinds of crazy routing strategies once you get your hands on the mechanic. And I did appreciate, speaking of the shield, I did a little test to see, okay, one thing I could see as an issue would be if you're playing really aggressively and your shield runs out, and then your shield like turns off, and then 1 frame later you're dead because a bullet hits you. You're trying to absorb it. So I think the game did a really good job preventing that from
There's a
happening.
whole second there, where you still can't die to bullets after the shield expires.
Yeah, that was.
You don't want people to be in the middle of a cloud of bullets and then get washed, right? Like,
exactly. That's what was one of my fears when I was looking at the mechanic. Like, oh, I wonder if it's going to be where you need to, like Garega. When you respawn in Garega, you got like barely any time to do anything because your invul just goes right out the window. So I was glad that had that nice invulnerability window.
Yeah, and all of that, really came from, I think, the base of the game was there fairly early already, but throughout we done a long alpha testing period and a long beta testing period. So all of that really got fine-tuned and added on and iterated. All the people that have helped us to test the game were such big helps. Even when you're talking about the pacing of the stages, those stages used to be twice as long, and there used to be a lot more dead time in them, which I had, consciously designed them that way. So you have some sort of intense periods and then a little bit of downtime to cool off. But the game was just way too long. The stages were way too long. Mm-hmm. But I as the creator, as the designer of the stages, was just super happy with what I made. So I didn't want to hear that those stages were too long because I wanted everybody to play them. Damn it! I wanted everybody to play what I made. So it did, then you get people saying, yeah, those stages are too long. And at one point, you get over your defensive reactions. That might be right here. So
we needed some tough love.
I think I think the testers were definitely helpful for that, and I think every shmup
it's a criticism that I probably would have. Right, yeah, and it's a criticism that I probably would have had as well if I had played somebody else's game. But it's very hard not to be biased about what you've made once you do something yourself. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I think one thing about shmups on that topic, on the idea of like, you want cooldown time and like intense period time, is that in the world of shmups, like that time is so much smaller than you would find in another genre because the pacing of the genre is so fast. So like literally like 3 seconds is like, that's a good rest. Like 1, 2, 3. All right, let's play now. Like where you see like a lot of like newer shmups or like people's first attempts at shmups, like they'll give you like 10 seconds. You're like, okay, this is out of hand here.
Yeah, exactly. You get into zeroing kind of territory.
Yes, exactly. So I think like all that stuff is so hard to pin, like you're saying, to pin down on your own. That's why having an active group of testers yelling at you constantly is definitely the way to go.
Yeah, it really helps a lot.
And they were yelling,
They're calling you on the phone. This is out of control.
Exactly. we had some super intense and long discussions with a couple of our core testers. Like almost every week we talk to them for literally hours on our Discord, and a lot of like the very fine details do stem from those discussions, which were all super friendly. But still, everybody had their opinions and wanted them see implemented.
Yeah. Things got very heated when the barrel roll.
The barrel roll.
The discussion.
We must discuss the barrel roll.
Yeah. So
because I felt like when I was going through the review, like I did my review and then I watched back, I was like, wow, I talked about that barrel roll a lot. I didn't realize how much I was talking about the barrel roll.
And I was watching the review today with my kids, and my son was saying, "Yeah, Daddy, he's got a point about that barrel roll." I kind of agree with him. He said. So I was like, "Oh no, now I have to explain everything again to my son here? Like why the barrel roll is the way that it is."
Well, I guess we're kind of joking about this on Discord. The solution is you can make like the Mark MSX range where like you zoom it in and then you have this beefy barrel roll. Like just to
bouncing off lasers like Star Fox. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But let's learn about the barrel roll because I'm very curious. So what's the story behind it?
Yeah.
It's actually not that interesting, I think. But what came of it is interesting. So at first, it was just there for visual flair. You know, it had no gameplay implications whatsoever. It was just something that our graphics guy made, and basically it was him and me that wanted the barrel roll to be in the game, just so you have something to do while you don't have anything else to do.
right.
Which comes back to what you said, you know, those 3 seconds of downtime between enemy waves or something like that, where you just stare at the screen and wait for the game to continue, right? That's boring, obviously.
Yes.
But sometimes it needs to be there to give you a little breather. And just to give the player anything to do there, we said, yeah, okay, you can barrel roll your ship. It doesn't do anything, it just looks cool, and that's it.
Yeah.
And as soon as our testers got their hands on the version with the barrel roll, they said, "Okay, this is shit. This doesn't do anything. We hate it. We hate it. Please do something." And we implemented a lot of versions of, you know, the first thing that everybody says is just give it iframes, so it's like a dash or something, but that really didn't feel right with the rest of the game. So we tried different things. We tried so many things. We tried different input methods. We had a version at some point, Michiel, what exactly was it? Like you drop your option when you barrel roll, and then you'd need to collect it again and things like that.
Craziness.
All sorts of craziness, but then we tried this version that is in the game now, where it throws off the homing missiles and the tracking lasers, and it's not really important towards the beginning of the game, but then when you get to the later stages, it really is.
There is some balancing around the barrel roll in the later stages. Yeah.
Definitely, you need it to survive some bosses and some fights. But still, I mean, I can totally see where you're coming from in your review, talking about that it feels a bit undercooked. But the thing is, as soon as we cooked it some more, it detracted from the core mechanic of the game, which is of course the shield mechanic.
Right.
Which is why we tried a lot of things and always went back to the current implementation, because it just didn't fit, and it was something else that you had to focus on, and basically distracted your focus away from what you should be really focusing on, which is of course shielding and chaining.
Well, I've been thinking about this, and I had, you know, some different ideas what you could do with it. There's actually a really simple solution to it that might be a little bit underwhelming, but what you could do is you could integrate the barrel roll into the actual movement and have it be a bit of visual flair. I think Zero Ranger has something like this, where like you're going left and right, and then every now and then like your sprite will like do a barrel roll just visually
by
just
itself.
To be cool. Yeah, just to be cool.
We did that.
Okay, but then the testers are like, bring back the barrel roll. We need it.
Yeah. It felt weird just to control, because sometimes your ship would do that, and then you didn't know exactly why. Oh man, we've gone through so many versions.
Oh
of
my
this.
gosh, you cannot escape the barrel roll.
No, you can't. No.
It'll haunt us. But it's
Absolutely.
It's a good lesson for our next project. You know, like, okay, you know,
the people want the next project. You're just barrel rolling constantly. It's like the whole game is about a barrel roll.
Yeah. This game was about the shield. The next game is about the barrel roll.
Barrel might, here we come.
Yeah, barrel might. Yeah. Now it's also this thing, like, it was never in my design docs, but I also feel like developing a game should be fun. So I let Hans and our graphics man have their fun with the barrel roll. You know, I wasn't really opposed to it, but then it became this thing it became larger than life, the whole barrel roll things, which is why it was so funny that it came back in your review again in such a big way.
You're just
I think 50% of the discussions on our Discord was barrel roll.
Well, yeah, I think it was an unfortunate pairing because I'm such a Star Fox fan that as soon as I saw a barrel roll, my eyes lit up.
Yeah, like, which is of course where it comes from. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to put out an idea, because I do want to kind of want to keep this idea to myself, but yet I'm sharing it with the internet. But if anyone uses this in their game, know that they might have stolen it from me. But I've been really thinking about, not in House of Bullets, but in the next shmup I making a taunt mechanic be sort of like the central focus of the game, like Devil May Cry, where you like chain and then you do like these taunts and stuff. So I thought, wouldn't shmups be interesting with a taunt mechanic? And it almost feels like that barrel roll is sort of in that line of like, it could be like this taunt mechanic
because you're styling on people, right?
Yes, exactly, right.
Yeah, but
if
that's
anyone
also
makes a shmup with a taunt mechanic, I'm going to be annoyed because I've been thinking about that for a year now.
Isn't that one of our topics as well? Like, bringing in influences from other games or other genres into shmups. Yeah.
But before we get there is one other thing I definitely wanted to cover, which is, and this might be a little bit more up Hans's alley, which is the decision to go with Unity, and the pros of Unity, because I'm seeing more and more shmups using Unity, and I'm like, wait a minute here, is this the way to go? So I was really curious, just why Unity? What's the strengths of Unity specifically in the shmup genre? Because I know it's like amazing for other stuff, but I mean specifically for shmup.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion. So the reason why we're using Unity basically just comes down to my personal history with it. So way back, 15 years back or so, I was modding some games. I was playing a lot of Command & Conquer Generals with a couple of friends, and then we started modding that game because it got boring to us. And I have always dabbled with like level editors and modding and stuff like that. But then when it came to me wanting to learn how to actually make a game from scratch by myself, I started looking for options. The first thing I started out with was XNA. It was an old Microsoft gaming framework. I wouldn't even call it an engine. Mm-hmm. And then Unity just came out. I started using Unity during the Unity 2 beta, I think. That was like 12, 13 years ago, maybe.
Holy smokes.
And back in those days, there just weren't that many options, and Unity was new and was like the hot thing to use. That was, there was no free Unreal Engine or Godot or things like that, like you have today. So there really wasn't that much of a choice back in those days. And Unity was the new player, was the new hot thing, all the mobile games. The mobile game craze just started around that day, around those times, and people just started flocking to Unity, and that's why I gravitated to it as well. And then that's just what I stuck with for a couple of years. I was just learning how to use it, and it was around maybe 2012, 13 or so, that I started a job at this software company in Germany, and I quickly got into Unity development there. So in my day job, I'm actually a augmented reality, virtual reality developer. In the enterprise space, we make not games, but everything else that you can think of that might be used in the enterprise world. So that was just what I knew. And then once Michiel and I started talking about making games, the obvious choice was Unity, because I already knew how to use it. Looking back at it, or like if I had to choose an engine now, it might not be Unity. But
what would you go with?
I'm not sure. Unreal is definitely interesting. I've dabbled with it a little bit, and Godot is even more interesting because it's open source. So one of the downsides to Unity is that you do not have source access. You can't even look at the source. I mean, there's like decompiled versions of it on the net, but that doesn't help too much in most cases. So all of the engines now, all the modern engines, they have a lot of pros and cons, of course, as all software frameworks do. The biggest pro of Unity, I would say, is how large the community around it is. So if you're looking to solve, the day-to-day problems, you're very likely to find a lot of good answers on like Stack Overflow or Unity forums, Reddit, etc. A bit less for Unreal and Godot, but those started later, right? The indie scene around Unity only started really developing once Unreal got changed to their free model, which is not that long ago. And Godot is not that old, right? So just for Unity, you have this huge community of developers. I don't think there's much all of them have pros and cons, but it's not like you could say, okay, this is the engine to go to for shmups. This is the engine to go to for, I don't know, FPS or whatever. Like Unreal has a lot of things out of the box that Unity does not have. It has the blueprint system, which is like a visual coding system that might make it easier for beginners, but then it has C++ as opposed to C# in Unity, which is harder to do. So yeah, it's not a clear-cut choice anyways, and yeah, just because I already knew Unity, that's of course what I stuck with, just the path of least resistance there. And it's a good engine. I love and hate it. That's
I
just
can imagine.
Yeah, of course. I mean, any tool you work with for years, you're going to develop this love-hate relationship with.
And I have heard that Unity is really good at crossing different platforms, so you could like bring it to PS4, Switch.
Yeah,
Xbox,
absolutely.
easily.
I think it's still the best for that. They have the broadest range of support for platforms, including all the consoles, which is something that, for example, for Godot, as far as I know, is not that easy. For Unreal, it's probably about the same for the major platforms, but Unreal does suffer a bit on mobile. I mean, it's not like we're planning a mobile port anytime soon, but if at any point we wanted to do that, then it's super easy to basically just change your export target and support the inputs.
Right.
For mobile, for example, yeah.
Make it a gacha game.
Yes.
Yeah. The pachinko version, of course. Yeah.
Are there any plans to bring it? Because people are already asking me, so I better ask the question. Are there any plans to bring it to PS4 or Switch at all?
Oh yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So Steam is definitely coming. That's what I'm working on right now. Switch will be next. Of course, we have to work with Nintendo there, so we haven't started that process yet, which is going to be interesting, especially since Michiel used to work at Nintendo.
Yeah, you got the connects. You like,
exactly,
here's my old badge. Yeah. I used to work here. Come on.
Exactly. I have to navigate my way through the company and find the people that don't hate me. So yeah.
You have to change your name.
Yeah. And then of course, yeah, PlayStation, Xbox, etc. Same thing. We'll look into that as soon as we have the platforms before that finished. Will definitely be interesting. I mean, all those companies have different indie programs, so that's going to be fascinating. Hopefully,
I think the strongest option is the Switch, even though I prefer the PS4 personally.
Yeah.
Just because the Switch has this little its own little world around it. It's like the center of the universe for this whole sector of gamers and gaming journalists and outlets and stuff. So like if anything shows up on there, it tends to get more attention than like on the PS4.
Yeah, so absolutely. And I mean,
I
there's
see
a lot
this
of
popping
players
off on the Switch.
Yeah, there are a lot of players nowadays that only play on a Switch,
Mm-hmm.
And of course the thing sells like crazy. So obviously it has a huge pull just as a market.
And it seems to be the platform for people that like 2D games and, let's say, quote-unquote retro games.
I know, isn't that odd?
You know?
I always thought that would be the PS4, but it seems like,
Yeah.
Like, for example, the amount of PS4 boys out there, it seems much lower, like in the comments and stuff, where people are like, where's the PS4 version? That's like not super common you'll see, but the Switch crew, I mean, are powerful. They are mighty. So
yes, absolutely.
Bringing it onto the Switch could be huge.
Yeah, I think we've got more questions when is it on Switch than we got sales on itch, pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what it is. I don't know how much I need to like brainwash my audience, but itch is cool, people. Buy it on itch.
Yeah.
It is really good, yeah. I mean, obviously it's good for developers. Like the barrier of entry is super low. You can set the revenue share just freely.
Yes.
We do kick back to itch, but it's less than what we would have on Steam and other platforms.
Steam 30%.
And the itch app works really well as well. Yeah. You don't have DRM. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, and I think I use this launcher called Play Night. That thing is awesome. And it's like
it unites all the different launchers, or
so Play Night is. Oh shit! I just hit the button. Whoops. Okay. Sorry, recording people. So it's like this free open launcher thing. So it's free, and it just launches EXEs and whatever you want it to launch. So it can launch Steam shit. It can launch, like I use it to launch all my emulators, and then you can use it to launch itch.io games. And it's also cool because it like tracks the play time and everything. Oh, this is why I opened it, because it tells me how much I've played different games and stuff. And I have like Fight and Rage on here. It's nice. 200 something hours. So I'm trying to see what it was, but so I always say, I don't know if people are aware of this, but if you get an itch.io game and then pair it with Play Night, I mean, it's just as good as Steam in my opinion. But
because I think that's the main reason why a lot of PC gamers are just staunch Steam heads.
Boys,
that's just like, okay, this is just my gaming what people like to say ecosystem. That's just where they want to hang out and get all their achievements and everything. Yeah.
It's like they're organizer because in the day of having like 500 EXEs and all these different folders, I get that. But I'm just saying you can do that for free with Play Night and it works really well. And it even has like the art and everything. You can make it look all pretty. I just hope people are a little bit more open-minded so they don't have to always get everything on Steam always, because Steam isn't always the best option for developers. So
that's true, yeah. But speaking of itch, what's super interesting, just to give you an idea of how small itch is in comparison to Steam. I don't think it deserves that. Like this thing should be bigger because it is super well made. But we were like Michael, what was it, 4th best-selling game or something on itch in our first or second week.
Yeah.
And believe me when I say we don't have that many sales. Like you'd be super surprised how little sales we have and versus how high we were in those sales charts. So itch is just. It's the tiniest drop in the ocean that is Steam. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think the way the model works now is it's kind of like the truest form of indie publishing, where you have to literally direct people to it. Like it's not like even Steam.
Absolutely.
Steam's like the YouTube of indie games. Like itch is like old school SoundCloud shit, like Google Drive type stuff. But at the same time, I think if people just were a little bit more aware of it, were a little bit more interested in it, and checked it out more. For example, working on House of Bullets, one of the best places I found to buy like cheap sprites and like quality cheap stuff was on itch. So I've bought a lot.
There's a lot on there.
That's great.
Yeah. Tools as well. There's a lot of super good small tools. Like I used some for some of our effects animations, like for the bullet absorption animation. I bought this tool of itch. It cost like $15. lifetime license. That's it, you know?
Yeah, and people are asking about the background in stage 1. They're like, "Oh, this background's really cool. Where'd you get it?" I was like, "Got it on itch for like $5." You know?
Yep.
And it's really funny because people love to champion indie, right?
Yeah.
But like, for example, when we announced our game like last year, I was just sending the trailer around to some of those I love indie type channels on YouTube and everything, and I got some responses back saying, "Yeah, we don't cover games that are just on itch only."
What the hell?
You know, these are supposed to be people that champion indie releases. That, like, itch is indie as fuck. You cannot get more indie than that.
It's like the ultimate indie.
Or the only way you can get more indie if you just distribute the game all by yourself.
On a CD that you mail to people.
Exactly.
Or like on Google Drive.
Sell it at the mall, yeah.
So for a lot of people, you just don't exist when you're in itch, you know? When you're just on itch only.
If you're really all about it, and I might do this with House of Bullets, is like you could put the revenue share to 0 and be like, nope, all the money's for me, baby.
Everything for me.
Everything. So, yeah, I just want people, because people have been already asking, oh, it wasn't on Steam. I just wanted to let them know you actually can buy it. And it works super fine on itch. You don't have to necessarily have the Steam version, but I'm a little bit more open to that sort of thing maybe than a lot of people are.
Yeah.
But of course, we're...
Yeah, no, go ahead, yeah.
We're not mad about, itch being small. This is actually what we anticipated and what we wanted for... I mean, this is the first game that we're releasing, right? So actually it takes off a lot of the pressure to just have this smaller platform to do a release on first, and
and
have people slowly, have people slowly trickling in, and then go to the big boys, and
I'm not saying
what you're doing.
I'm not saying like people shouldn't buy it on Steam or anything, because I do see the value of Steam. I'm just saying, like, if you're one of those I'm homegrown, free range indie type person, then I think you should definitely check out the itch version, because it is better for the developers. But if you're just the average consumer, there's no reason why you shouldn't get it on Steam. But
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and like Hans said, it's also kind of what we expected. We, in the whole marketing trajectory of this whole thing, sorry to get all corporate on you, we saw it also more like getting the itch release out first is more of let's say the buzz phase before we really start making a lot of noise when it's out on Switch and Steam. Because we have a few ways that we can get it out there in the larger media and everything, but I don't want to do that unless our game is widely available, because you cannot count on people to remember you, and you get people's attention only once. So at that point you want to be everywhere.
Yeah, I definitely understand. And I think that is important. And I've been thinking about another thing, too, just on the indie side of thing. What do you guys think about a physical release, but like marketability of that? Like from your side, not from the fan side of, oh, we love physical, we want to buy it. I mean, from yours guys' side. Does that seem like a good direction to go as far as to make money, or is that kind of like a money pit? Because I actually don't know, and it seems... So at times it seems like, oh, that could be a great way to make money. And then at other times it'd be like, that could seem like
as much as I hate the limited run model and the whole FOMO thing, that is actually a surefire way almost always to make money, because people will just want it because it's a limited release, right? So you can at least you set I think like a limited stock of what you're going to produce, and you can be fairly sure that you will sell out of that stock, because just people will just want something that's limited.
And
so I think it's even though I don't like it, because that model myself, I see why it's kind of like a smart way of doing business.
Yeah, and you guys have put together, I think, a really slick professional game here, right? So I wouldn't go this route myself as far as like limited run, because House of Bullets is way too jank and shitty. But like your guys' would you want to go through like a limited run, or would you want to do it more like self-release? Just as far as what do you think would be more financially better?
I think financially better would be for us definitely to work with a manufacturer or a party that you sign some sort of deal with, so we don't have to go through the manufacturing process ourselves.
Right, that's true.
But then I would prefer to do it in a way that it's, not as limited a run. That it's a little bit more widely available and people don't have to go all scalp crazy over it.
Yeah, which probably doesn't happen if you have at least some sort of publisher.
Yeah.
Not really sure how that goes. Yeah. Of course, we would love to have a physical release. Just the thought of holding your own, Switch version or whatever in your hands is, of course, very alluring. We'll see how that goes once we do digital on more platforms.
Yeah, because it seems like the steps here are like, I like the steps you're taking here. So it's like itch first to get it to the homies, and then it builds up some buzz, it builds up some noise, and then you bring it to Steam, and then like the more casual audience and the wider audience, that's how they're going to consume it. And then from Steam, you can kind of see now, okay, this is how it's selling, this is how people are reacting to it. Now do we bring it to maybe the Switch or PS4 eShop or whatever? And then from there, then you can kind of see, okay, now the game seems to be sinking its teeth into the audience more. Now we can bring out the big guns and bring out the physical version, and then you can get the whole suite of release opportunity for the game.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea, definitely.
And then if like along the way, that way you're not like going too all in all at once, and like you're saying, you get one chance. You don't want to like overdo it, and then you're like losing money. That's
exactly. Yeah. No, for sure.
Well, I did get a little bit lost in the weeds in there talking about all that stuff, because that stuff really interests me. But some other things I wanted to talk about. I guess any plans for future stuff for the game, or is it pretty much all set? Or are you thinking about, when it comes to Steam, maybe adding in a bit of DLC here or there? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah. There's definitely stuff coming. We have some in the works right now. So there's going to be a couple more RNG modes.
Nice.
That are pretty much finished already. Just need some testing. Then I've been working on a replay system for months now.
And I've heard someone told me in the comment section that replay systems in Unity are a tough biscuit.
It is super tough. Yeah,
that is WLTR. He's been testing the game as well. Yeah.
So I'm still not 100% sure if I actually can make it. I'm pretty far along, but I think Michiel commented that somewhere as well. No promises. I'm kind of cautiously optimistic. So the issue is exactly like he was it WLTR that commented?
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah. So basically, traditional replay systems work by recording inputs and then basically re-simulate a session, right? So that works fairly well as long as you are in the right engine and nowadays on the right hardware for that. So the issue there is that Unity and all the other modern engines work quite a lot differently from older consoles and older arcade hardware. As in, you don't have a fixed time step,
right?
Because you have different frame rates, right? That's one of the problems, and then the other problem is that floating point operations on modern hardware are ever so slightly different between different CPUs from different makers, or even different generations from the same hardware maker. So if I record a replay on my PC and send it to Michiel, we both have Intel CPUs, but since he has a different generation of CPU, the floating point operations are slightly different, which leads to desyncs in the replay, right?
Oh man.
Yes.
So and do you have to, like, I'm taking a guess here. Do you have to make this replay system work, you have to have like some sort of built-in function in your replay system that like assesses the computers.
Basically, yeah.
It's like, okay, this is the exact values of this computer. Then it has to
not the values of the computer, but basically what you do is, or what I'm doing in the approach that I'm working on right now, is you build in fail safes into the system. So say, for example, you're flying up and down on the screen with the ship, and you're only recording the inputs, right? Say at frame X, you're inputting a downwards input. Frame Y, which could be like 20 frames later, you're inputting an upwards input. And just to make sure that those are perfectly synced up, I also record the position of the ship when the input changes. So those, then I can detect if the simulated state and the recorded state match up, and if they don't, I can slightly correct it. So I'm building in these fail safes, and it sort of works. But there's still some kinks to the system that I have to work out, and I'm not exactly sure if I will be able to do it. But yeah, as I said,
I feel like if
optimistic.
you are able to do it, you'll be like in the Hall of Fame of Shmup developers, right? You'll get like a
lot
shrine.
A lot of people have already built systems like that. I'm sure of it. It's just that, I don't want to keep working on this for months on end, and I could be working on actually improving the core gameplay, right?
Yeah,
that's the issue there. It comes down to a bit of time management.
I guess the cool part though is if you get that to work, you could add it into your leaderboard system, which would be super cool.
That's the plan. That's the setup. Yeah. That every leaderboard entry you can watch that back. Yeah,
that is huge. Because I realized, like, just as a consumer, so let's say some games come out with leaderboards. I like leaderboards, and I'm not saying they're not cool, but when you have leaderboards without replays and leaderboards with replays, it's a massive difference. Because the other day, I was playing some shmup, I can't remember what it was. I was like, I have no idea how to play this. And then I went onto the leaderboard and watched a replay on the leaderboard. I'm like, okay, I know how to play it now. Like, that is such a useful tool. Plus,
it's a good way to check for if people are messing the system, because having to have because it will be much harder to cheat a playthrough with replays.
So
exactly. And just to elaborate a bit more on the whole floating point operation situation there, I think somebody else commented that somewhere as well. Like, because those modern game engines are using the floating point operations that are part of the hardware of the CPUs, that's why we get those differences, right? There are other ways to circumvent it. So basically, you can re-implement floating point operations as integer operations, which are pretty much guaranteed to be the same across all CPUs. But then that means that you need to build your own custom math libraries, and you need to build your own physics libraries. So it's a whole mess. Which is why this is so tough. And on all the systems, say like you have a Super Nintendo game, you know what chip this is running on. It's going to be the same every time. It runs at a fixed time step of for 60 FPS. So you didn't have that issue back then.
Well,
so it's a wholly modern problem
that I want to ask about. Let's say you did this for console, right? And if someone's playing on a PS4 versus a PS4 Pro, would that make a difference?
It would not make a difference with the system that I'm setting up if it works.
Okay.
But if not, it would definitely make a difference,
Right.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
That's crazy.
Because, basically what I'm doing now is the gameplay itself runs at a fixed frame rate, and all the frames in between are interpolating those positions and values. So it wouldn't matter if you're running the game at, if your actual video frame rate is 10 FPS or 120 FPS, it would still result in the same gameplay.
Yeah,
if it all works out.
Yeah, I think that's the future for the genre. As much as we all love 60 FPS and everything, I think we're getting nearer to that time where we need to start swapping over to higher frame rate possibilities,
As soon as you want to support different platforms, PCs, consoles, phones, whatever, you need that, and you're going to run into that problem, unfortunately.
Exactly. And speaking of new platforms, so this was another big part of my video that I was like, I talked about this more than I expected, but you guys just kind of landed in, well, yours a great example, so I think it was good to include, though it wasn't necessarily specifically about Shield, but the aspect ratio, the 16:9 aspect ratio.
So that was very interesting.
What did you guys think about that?
Yeah, it was funny because some other of our testers told us actually, you guys actually nailed it, the 16:9 aspect ratio. You know, like it doesn't feel like your typical 16:9 shooter where you just feel like there's a lot of space on screen. We were conscious of the aspect ratio, of course, and we chose the aspect ratio because that's just, like you said, the modern screen standard, and we just wanted to work around that. So all with the stage design and the zoom levels and everything, we definitely were conscious of not having a lot of extra space all of a sudden on screen, you know? But I think you were the first person to point out, and I thought it was a very interesting point, that just the overall feel of it, because I think we solved it from a game design and mechanical point of view.
Or like rolling gunner.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, it's not like there's a lot of extra space now, especially if you hit the later loops in the later modes. Yeah, you'll find like you'll be nicely cramped. Like things will heat up and cook up very nicely there. But I thought it was a very interesting point that you said. Like, it feels less visceral. Is exactly what you said, right?
Yes,
like,
that's kind of what I was
things are
critiquing.
less in your face. So I think that's a very good point. Yeah, something to be more mindful of in the future for sure. Yeah.
Well, and the thing I wanted to bring up with you guys is that I don't know if this has necessarily ever been quite addressed or solved, so that's why I didn't feel like it was necessarily a critique of just your game specifically. That's why I tried to point out, like, R-Type Final 2, Rolling Gunner, like all 16:9 shmups are sort of struggling with this, or at least it's kind of an interesting aspect of them, because when you're playing 4x3, the screen is you're just so immediately close to everything that it just feels really visceral. But when you spread it out to 16:9, it is so hard to achieve that because you're basically zooming outward most of the time. And what did you guys think? Like, the only solution I've been able to come up with is like, make everything big, like make the sprites big, make everything bigger. But
you also have to make everything wider, right? So everything becomes naturally wider almost.
Yeah, and that's a problem.
So, because otherwise you lose a lot of vertical space.
Exactly. So that's why I'm scared of 16:9.
So I think you'll find maybe if you continue to play, maybe you'll feel less strongly about it, because the later loops and the later stages will, for example, also have a lot of Zako and enemies that come flying in from the left side of the screen, for example, you know?
Right.
So you start maybe using the mid-screen more.
Well, that's what Rolling Gunner did. So Rolling Gunner, the way they got around this, even though I still think, though, sometimes when you're playing Rolling Gunner, you're like, this game is tiny. Like, it feels like sometimes like this game, like your chip's tiny, the bullets are tiny. There's just a lot of it on screen.
Yeah.
But the way Rolling Gunner addressed it was, let's give you a gun that spins in all these directions.
And then give the warnings also from what enemy, what side enemies come. Like in Death Smiles. Death Smiles has enemy warnings as well, right? Yeah.
Right. And but like, because horizontally, it's not, because like it's hard to explain exactly, but it's not like you're just widening. You're also sort of in a way narrowing it too, right? Because you're stretching the horizontal space, but the vertical space is still the same. So everything just gets wider. So it's a weird shift that, like, if I were to naturally change the genre, I would just make the whole thing bigger. But then, of course, that's not how monitors don't want to do that. They want to get wider. And I think it's putting shmups, horizontal shmups specifically, though vertical shmups in a way, in kind of this weird position that maybe they don't even want to be in, but they're in it, which is, okay, everything's getting wider. What do we do about this?
And a funny thing is also that it's we in our recording chat, we were also talking about the Darius games, right? Like those games existed since the 80s with the ridiculous widescreen setups, which is not all that conducive to the moment-to-moment gameplay, actually.
Oh yeah, I think Darius 1, it's kind of silly.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's not that great.
Yeah. It has a reason to exist because that game just made a huge impact on people that played it in arcades. Just the whole, the cabinet
insane.
Experience of it.
Yeah,
and a ridiculous widescreen, but also then the vibrating seats and the speakers and everything.
Yeah,
it was just a massive experience. In that sense, it was justified. But if you play it now at home via your Darius Cosmic Collection, it doesn't really land that way, does it?
Yeah, and also Darius kind of walked it back a little bit too. Like, they're like, all right, let's.
Gaiden was.
They're like, all right, let's actually do 4x3 here, and most people think Gaiden's the best. I would say it is, but.
Yeah, and then Darius Burst does it again, all over again. Yeah.
I know. I haven't touched that game.
What I would actually love to do is have just a dynamic aspect ratio, because for example, I'm working on a 21 by 9 screen. So every time I'm playing Schildmaid, I get the what's it called, the black bars.
Yeah.
Yes. Whatever those are, borders.
The letterbox or the other box.
Yes.
So, some type of box.
The gutters.
So exactly. So I would love to, have just a dynamic aspect ratio, but then how is that gonna work in a 2D game, right? It works in 3D games because it doesn't matter if things are off screen or on screen except for your field of view. But in a game like this, for example, bullets disappear as soon as they leave the screen, right? We have enemy homing missiles and we don't want them coming back once they left the screen, because that leads to cheap deaths. So we need to define the aspect ratio in a fixed manner. So what are you going to do, right? You can't do 21 by 9 because then it would be harder or easier depending on the situation. You can't do 4 by 3 because then things would leave the screen earlier. It would change the gameplay experience depending on your monitor, right?
I was thinking of something a little wild, a little crazy, which is, what if you added a camera button to the shmup where, so the game is actually still 16 by 9. So think of Shield. It's still the way it is. And then there's a button that you hit and it zooms in to 4 by 3, like on your ship. And then you hit it again and it goes back to 16 by 9. And you can like just hit that button and it'll like zoom in and out on your ship. And kind of, so like there could be certain times where you launch these massive dense patterns at the ship and you hit the camera button. Now you're in on your ship. You can kind of navigate them. And then you hit it again. Now you're macroed out and you can kind of macro around things. Like that's kind of a not the most elegant solution, but it would be interesting to see.
Very interesting. I'm getting almost like I'm getting associations with Beautiful Joe here, with the slow zoom and that sort of thing. You could do something really wicked with that, yeah.
Well, I feel like two-dimensional games are gonna run into this problem eventually, one way or another, with this whole widening aspect ratio. What do we do here? Because even with like platformers, as they get wider and wider, you're just gonna continue to get more and more zoomed out to the point where like your guy's just this little dot on the screen and like you see the entire level on the screen at once. Like as they get more and more wide, which they
what was that game on Xbox Live Arcade?
Castlevania.
Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance.
Harmony of Dissonance, yeah. Excellent game.
There's this crazy, like, zoomed out Castlevania platform. On,
they did exactly, they did exactly that. You could see the whole level. Yeah, that was crazy.
I know. So I'm wondering if, like, we're getting closer and closer to maybe a camera system somehow getting involved.
Yeah, we're doing that a little bit with our bigger bosses.
Yeah, I did notice that. You like it'll like zoom out a bit. I did notice.
Yeah, exactly. It zooms out, and especially during one boss fight, this big command ship, you can actually navigate outside of the boundaries of what you're seeing. So it's basically you're moving the map up and down and left and right. It's only really used during that boss fight.
Yeah, it's like Star Fox 64's all range mode, in that particular boss fight you have free movement.
That's cool. I love that. I think shmups need to start doing some more of this type of stuff because I feel like if we want to stick to the traditional style, I think that's totally awesome. But at some point, like when people want to start doing these new ideas, they sometimes just don't fit in with the traditional style all that well. Yeah. Like, for example, I think your guys is, that's why I did feel a little bad because I don't think you guys like necessarily did anything like, oh, this is a problem type of thing. I was just more commenting on sort of the nature of the aspect ratio.
Yeah,
but
fair enough.
The one thing that I do think is going to be a problem, or it's going to be really interesting, is when people start going the 16:9 vertizontal route. That's going to get tricky because now
that's happening. Yeah, I've seen a couple of games being announced already with.
And there's one that I'm going to review that I'm very curious to see if they maybe solved the problem or if it's still because that is a lot of horizontal space right there.
Yeah, how did you feel? Because it has happened already a couple of years back with GRF's Under Defeat New Order mode, right? Like that was.
I never played that.
A vertizontal, yeah.
And that was 16:9 for vertizontal.
Yep.
Wow.
It's weird. It kind of worked for me personally. Not everybody's a fan of it because of the sort of. It's not completely vertical, but kind of tilted to perspective, right? Like tilted forward, like Raystorm, for example. So you see enemies a little bit further ahead in the distance, and of course you have this sort of swinging motion of the helicopter, like from left to right, and you can angle your fire. So it was all right for that game for me. I kind of enjoyed the whole experience of it, but
that's actually an interesting idea. Like with some perspective tricks, you could essentially have what is actually 4x3 playing field fit better into a 16:9.
Yeah, if you tilt it, for example,
Yeah. You could do the same for a Hori, I guess.
That
would look a bit weird, maybe, but could work.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to explore there anyway, so I did want to bring that up because I thought
it was a very interesting point. And nobody,
doable.
Even with all the testing, nobody had made that point to us yet.
I think that's a very specific thought of mine. I don't think anyone else really.
Yeah, maybe it's also interesting. Like, I don't think we ever talked about the aspect ratio. It was just the first prototype that I made was 16:9, and since that was fun, maybe that's why we didn't even pick up on it. And what's probably also interesting is that obviously I'm not as in-depth into shmups as Michiel is, so I didn't think about this problem that much.
Yeah, I thought about it a lot while doing level designs, like...
I'm sure you're there's a lot of space here to fill.
Yeah, exactly. I really kept it in mind with the level designs, especially like you talk about in the video with those laser grids as well. Like how do I cut the screen up into pieces, like compartmentalize it and try to trap the player and those kinds of things. So yeah, I was very conscious of that sort of screen space.
Yeah, so other things that we should talk about, because I don't want to just rant about aspect ratio the entire time. You poor guys. Any other things that came up during the making of your guys' game that you think really stand out that I don't think maybe a lot of players are going to pick up on, or it's not like totally obvious, but once you get to know the game better, it's a real feature of the game that I think you'll think people really appreciate.
Maybe more talking about things that people will pick up on is the music, which is
definitely
just Ed did such a bang job with that. As Michiel said, initially the game was smaller and it looked quite a fair bit simpler, and then once we got those first tracks from Ed, we said to ourselves, we got to step up our game now, because we got this really, really well-made professional banging soundtrack, and we got a couple of boring-looking sprites. That's not good. We need to really step it up there, and that's when a lot of the VFX work and a lot of more intricate sprite work started.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
And the thing that also maybe that a lot of people that don't already know about this project might not realize is that this is not traditional 2D pixel art, but it's the old Donkey Kong Country trick of
I didn't know
pre-rendered sprites. Yeah.
That's cool.
And you probably don't
do
notice it because Johannes Hans actually did a lot of after touching with sort of like thicker lo-fi pixels.
Well, that's cool. So what were you using as the models?
Yeah, it's three.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Those are all custom-made models by our art guy. He works in Blender, and we try to. The most challenging thing, as far as I know, are the outlines, or the not outlines, but the inner lines as well, the inner pixel lines for the sprites. That apparently took a lot of Blender magic. I'm not too familiar with how that works.
Right.
I think the result is pretty good.
Yeah.
He is you might guess from the mini bosses. He's a huge Star Wars fan. That's why they look so Star Destroyer-y. Yeah, that was definitely like at first. We just use placeholder sprites like from Gradius NES and things like that. And then once we got the first ship, I think the red ship, the Wyvern, was the first ship that he finished, including the barrel roll.
Yes.
And that I love that style. I mean, obviously that's a matter of taste. Some people just don't like the blown up pixel art, and that's okay. Personally, I just love it. And then once I started layering on the particle effects, which I also get, they're a bit much for some people. That's why I can turn them off.
No, they're not.
Yeah, I was very happy to see you actually.
I love them. Yeah,
talk with them. Yeah.
A lot of people turn them off and turn other effects off as well, which is obviously fine. Some people don't like blooms, some people don't like screen shake, slow-mo effects.
I love all of that. I kind of,
that's
looking
cool.
back at it, I do wish I had talked a little bit more about that in the review, because I did think the presentation on those specific things really stood out to me as that's why I was saying I felt like it was very professional, felt very polished, because those are the first areas I always look when I'm playing a new Indie Shmup or something. I'm like, okay, how are the explosions? Are they big? Are they meaty? Are they all over the place? And then I look at your guys's, and they had big meaty explosions with the particle effects and then the slowdowns. I was like, oh, this is what I'm talking about. I thought that was really good. So
yeah,
in that regard, I do not agree with the testers.
Nice.
The other thing that you also talked about in your review is just the number of video options and accessibility options.
I was like, whoa.
Thanks. Yeah, a lot of work went into that as well. Especially with accessibility nowadays, it's a big topic, and it deserves to be. I'm personally very happy that it has come to this, because some games still don't do it, and they really stand out in a big negative way, in my opinion. Like last year, I played Metroid Dread, which is a good game, and it's a $60 game by Nintendo, so it doesn't get much more AAA than that. The number of accessibility options in that game is 0, and that's a bit ridiculous.
Do you mean for like colorblind people?
Yes, but also just even more basic things like remapping your controls. I mean, you can obviously do that. Oh my god,
you couldn't remap your controls?
No.
Oh,
and you have
ridiculous.
to mash. You have to mash to shoot quickly.
Yeah, that's absurd.
It is, yeah. And so we went out of our way to include as many things as we could think of, but of course we're also looking for feedback there from people that have issues with accessibility of our game. Happy to improve on that, because inclusivity, it's not just a buzzword, it's a real thing. If there is somebody that wants to play our game but can't for some reason, that makes me super sad. So anything we can do there to help and improve on that, we're definitely gonna do it,
Yeah, and I was really impressed looking through the list. I am partially colorblind, and my brother is like really colorblind, and so like I remember so I've actually been aware of this for quite a long time, because back in the day we used to play Call of Duty against online and stuff, and he had a hell of a time because he couldn't tell who was the enemy and who wasn't, because it was like red or green, and to him they're the same color. Yeah. So he's like shooting his teammates half the time, and he's actually a really good player. Yeah, and then Call of Duty added a colorblind mode, quite a long time ago. And when he added it, he's like, oh shit, I can play Team Deathmatch now. So
how cool is that, right?
Yeah. And then also Battle Garega, this is something I have actually argued with people about, where, like real purist types would say, oh, you shouldn't be allowed to use the colored bullets in the PS4 port, because, that's an extra advantage over playing it on the, blind mode version that is the arcade. And I tried to explain to people, listen, if those colored bullets aren't on there, I cannot play the damn game, because I literally cannot see them. It's like, it's not even a matter of skill. It's like, I'm just flying around and I'm dead. What happened?
Exactly. What just killed me?
Yeah. So I am a big proponent of like colorblind shit, making stuff visible, and of course control remapping. I think that's absurd that Metroid Dread didn't have that, because Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo has control remapping.
True.
Plus, I think just as a player, control remapping is a must, because you want to play on your arcade stick, you don't want to play on their stupid setup. So
exactly.
Yeah, and the thing is also, apart from just the accessibility menu, we also made sure that any important information is not just conveyed through sight only, or through color only, or through audio only. You might have noticed that whenever your shield goes down, you hear a danger voice saying, and then when your shield is ready to use again, it says okay, like real Giga Wing style,
Yes.
But then also like the color, the bullets changing color is not. It's not Ikaruga. It's not like, oh, now the bullets are safe to be collected. It's just a visual aid. It's the state of your ship that determines whether you can collect the bullets or not. But we made them change color just so you have a visual cue. Okay, now it's safe. But
I think that's very good design.
There's a lot of layered information apart from the gauges, and then the info on the screen itself in the game itself. Like we want to convey all the necessary information in various ways during gameplay.
Yeah, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, is that shmups, I think, should start trying more to get away from like on-screen gauges and try and integrate more and more information into the playfield somehow. Yeah. For example, like even in House of Bullets, it's in the newest update, so people can't see it yet. But so I decided, okay, I'm gonna add like a hyper because like it's complicated. Yeah. It's gonna have like this little hyper. But the problem is that I've always felt like games that have the hyper up in the corner, and so you have to like watch the corner as you're playing. Your eyes need to do like the whole split screen eyes to try and see the gauge and see what you're doing. And I've noticed some games have started adding like hyper meters like under your character and stuff. I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. So I went out of my way, and now there's like a little hyper meter that appears under your character, so you don't have to look in the corner to see the hyper gauge. And so I think more and more that shmups can get away from keeping everything on like gauges. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Helsinker, and putting it onto the game screen. I think that's just for playability. Is also really good.
Yeah. Helsinker is extra tough because it's even off screen. It's like in the,
it goes extra hard.
Sidebars. Yeah.
I'm still working on some improvements there. I definitely like the idea of either having no UI or have the UI at your character, like you said. So there's probably in the future going to be an option to move the UI to your ship. But even now, there are a lot of things that we're doing there. So for example, once your EX weapon is ready, your ship starts blinking with this purple outline. Or the shield, the shield has the gauge on top, of course. But you can also see it change color.
So it that's turns very useful.
From blue or golden, depending on your upgrade level. It gradually changes to red before it runs out, right? So, and then you have the audio cues as well. So we're already trying to, get you away from those gauges a little bit. I mean, I'm a fighting game player, so I'm used to looking at all sorts of meters that are sometimes on the top and on the bottom of the screen and in all the corners, right? So I'm used to that. But I totally get that not everybody likes that, or that some people have trouble, and that's again an accessibility issue, of course.
Yeah. Well, I also wonder, like, why don't fighting games? Speaking, not to go on the fighting game tangent, but I feel like this is something fighting games themselves might think about. Like, like you're playing Guilty Gear, and you know, like your gauge is way up in the left corner, and you're like trying to split your eyes to see your gauge, and you know, try and react to what they're doing. Like, why not have like a little meter that, maybe make it optional that you know can appear at like the feet or sort of somewhere. Near your character,
some way, like, maybe a more elegant way to show the state of your character as well. That could be interesting.
Yeah.
Lest you turn the game into the average screen of World of Warcraft with meters on everything. You know?
Right. Yeah. Yes. Something.
Yeah. It's super interesting.
Well, so the last topics that we have on here that I don't want to ignore is, Mikhail, you talked about sort of the challenge of iteration versus innovation when it comes to designing a game. So I wanted to get your thoughts, especially because I would feel like, interestingly enough, Shield is more on the innovation side of things, I would say. It feels pretty innovative. I haven't quite seen stuff like this before. But also, you know, you can't do everything from scratch. So I'd love to hear your kind of thoughts.
Exactly. Together. I think we also mentioned Euro Shmups a little bit, right? Like your typical Euro Shmup developer maybe has played R-Type in the arcades once, and then they think they got the whole genre figured out, and they sort of reinvent the wheel from beginning, and makes all sorts of mistakes that has been solved by previous developers already, you know, that they just don't know about.
Yes.
And I think that has been the reason why Japanese shoot 'em ups have been so great, is that Japanese development is very iterative, right? Like people look at each other's games and then see, okay, this is good, we'll keep this, and then we'll add something on top of that. And yeah, I think that is a very very sound way to develop a genre such as shoot 'em ups. This is also why what I was saying, why I felt so intimidated, like, you know, like by developers like Cave and Treasure and Gref, which is why I wanted to stay away from having to make something that would even come close to that. But I think actually the way in was innovation, because I felt like with the shield mechanic, I never saw it done anywhere quite in the same way. The bullet absorbing. One of your commenters on your video mentioned a game called Samidare, which I was not familiar with, so I checked it out. Thankfully, it's nothing like our mechanic, so I wasn't plagiarizing unknowingly.
Well, there's so many shmups with so many mechanics.
With shields, yeah, exactly.
So that's why I even said it in a review. I'm like, that I'm aware of, because you know there's some shmup from 1997 on the PC Engine or something that one time had a shield mechanic where you could, you know what I mean, like, so
you never 100% know. But as far as I'm aware of, we made something that hasn't really been done yet in quite the same way. You know, you can make comparisons to Ikaruga, or you can make comparisons to Giga Wing with its bullet reflect barrier and those sort of things. One of my sort of more subconscious inspirations was Cyvarier as well, because I like the way that Cyvarier changes your relationship with bullets, right? They're not just something you need to stay away from, but you need to sort of, you need to do the whole grazing thing. And so you start to see bullet patterns as an opportunity rather than just a threat. So that is something that found its way into Schildmaid as well. But I think by having something that I feel we could add to the genre, that was our way in as well, you know. And I feel like when you achieve something like that, like make some kind of innovation that is fun, it also helps to not make the genre die. Because just having games that follow the tried and true pattern of what makes a good shoot 'em up, will eventually sort of lead to the genre petering out, I fear.
Yeah. And I do think, just from a design perspective, having that central goal, that central design mechanic or philosophy, really helps clarify almost the entire game to you, like everything. Because, for example, with House of Bullets, like the two rules of House of Bullets are more enemies and no downtime. So whenever I'm like sitting there and I'm like designing waves, designing patterns, and I'm running into like, oh, what should I do here? I always go to the rules. Okay, more enemies.
Yep.
No downtime. So that exactly. Informs the entire development of everything. It informs every pattern. It informs every mechanic I do. It informs everything. And so I feel like that shield mechanic's probably the same way, where you look at it, you're like,
yep,
it needs to fit with the shield.
Exactly. That's where it flowed. Everything, the rest of the game, sort of flew from there, or flowed from there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So everything that we layered on top of it, everything that we added was completely based around that shield mechanic. Yeah. That's why.
Which is also why we removed a lot of things that we experimented with, because it didn't fit well with that shield mechanic.
Yeah. And it's the way why. It's the reason why. Everything is the way it is in the game, and why it is so quirky and unusual, in many ways.
Yeah, well, I've had a lot of fun playing it, and now I'm interested in testing out Chimera mode and giving that a go, because that does sound pretty interesting, especially when you're saying that the scroll speed starts speeding up and stuff. I'm like, ooh, that sounds cool.
Yeah, Chimera mode is insane. Yeah.
It gets a bit wild because you start racking crazy multipliers as well, and a little known thing about the game is that a growing active multiplier also adds to your DPS, so you start doing more damage, and your bullets start growing in size. So things get pretty crazy in Chimera mode, where the game starts scrolling faster and your bullets start growing in size, and becomes all mayhem and destruction.
Well, I was going to ask you guys, what are your personal favorite aspects of the game, or your personal favorite levels or modes, or, what are you guys most into as, the developers?
To me, Chimera mode is definitely crazy fun, but you only having one life can make it pretty tough. Like after a long run, just out of nowhere, the run is over. I can see how that is alluring to some people. To me, it's a little less alluring. I think the latest addition that we made, the Ziga mode, like the Omake mode, we called it internally, was a pretty good addition. It's a single 10-minute stage that kind of remixes elements from all the other modes, and especially from late Chimera mode. A bit toned down because you're using the default 3 ships. But I think that addition was fantastic. So just it's just a 10-minute thing, but it's pretty tough to get through, and especially to get a no miss is pretty hard. But that was super fun. And apart from that, to me personally, games are all about juice, the juiciness of explosions, effects, just that visceral feeling of making things go boom.
Yes.
So I hope that we got that down to a good degree. That's the most fun part for me. And then a little bit of competition on the leaderboards. That's good, super fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I do hope that this game, because I could see this game catching on with a certain sector of players, like a Kiwi type person or a Pearl getting their hands on the game and doing
Pearl's been testing a little bit as
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see it. Well, Twilight EX you're talking about, I'm sure, if he starts playing it a bunch, that will be super impressive too.
Yeah, he was enjoying it, his first run into the game, yeah. Yeah, I think Seeger mode is... I was actually playing that before we started recording, because I could only clear it with one of the 3 ships. Other people have cleared it with the other 2 ships, so it's not horribly balanced against the other 2. But I found it tougher with the other 2 ships to do it. So I was trying, and it's just really fun because it's a quick restart and you don't get set very far back, just trying to get a little bit further each time. It was pretty addictive. I just couldn't stop trying it, and with both my the ships that I don't perform as well as in that mode, I got pretty far, which was satisfying to see that I was making some breakthroughs.
Well, that's awesome. And I think the addition of these extra modes is, again, a great feature to have, because I think, in the long run, like having a nice selection of ranges and different ways to play the game really helps.
Yeah, I think so too. I love that with about cave games like Daifukatsu and and of course Mushima-sama Futari. Yeah,
I think that stuff goes a really long way. And then maybe someday we might see the barrel roll range where you just barrel roll all day.
It
might happen.
Barrel roll.
Barrel might.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Any other topics you guys want to cover before we call the episode?
I think we're good for this time, right? Like, we talked about a lot of things. There's so much still we could talk about and left to say, but maybe we can have another chat some other time.
Yeah,
as soon as we get some more updates and some more platforms out there. We do have some crazy ideas that we might add to the game at a later point, or that might spin off into their own games. We're not quite sure there ourselves yet, but there's definitely more to come.
Yeah, and I'm definitely hoping that when the game comes to Steam, when the game comes to Switch, that it makes a splash, because I think it definitely deserves it. And it does sometimes annoy me a little bit how selective the wider gaming press is with shmups, where they'll cover like only the most recognizable stuff. Then all this great stuff just flies completely under the radar, like, whatever, So
yeah,
that's part of the reason why
it has become a little bit better in recent years, though.
Yes, it has.
Like, there's more shoot 'em up coverage now.
That's part of the reason why I specifically pointed out like comparisons with R-Type in my review, because it's like, because as I was reviewing this, I was like a little bit annoyed, because I was like, this game's better than R-Type, but no one's gonna know. No one's gonna talk about it. Well, I guess I'll talk about it. So that's why I sort of made the comparison between the two.
It's a different game. I mean, we don't really want to compete with those big boys. At least not yet. Let's see.
Yeah, and here's to hoping when they do the next R-Type that it's better, so I don't have to constantly get people yelling at me over my review over it. So I always, this is why the Platinum game scares the shit out of me, because
Soul Cresta.
Yeah, that thing scares me. Every time I see trailers for it, I shake in fear, because I know I gotta cover it. I absolutely have to.
Yeah,
and
it's funny because it looks more like an indie game. It doesn't look like a big studio.
I know that was pretty disappointing, to be honest. Even
after it's super interesting that they're making that, but I mean, Platinum is so hit or miss. They made some of the greatest games of all times,
and then
but
some
also
real
some
stinkers.
pretty boring ones.
Yeah, they are very hit and miss. So that game scares me, because I know it's going to get a ton of coverage, and then if it's not that great and I bash on it, round 2. So
yeah.
So I do hope these bigger games are good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for coming on.
It's been really fun chatting with you, Mark. Yeah, it's been good to be in the show for the first time.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having us, man.
Adios, everyone. Thank you to the $5 patrons: 100, Dingo, Another Joe, Anthony A, Anthony Iodice, Aaron Solis, Ben, Blur STG, Borgie22, Brian Reboot, Brian Shiver, Bubblegum Crisis 1394, Chris Yuzefovich, Chronic Burnout 3, Cook Some Soup, Corey Mark, DES Audio, Danielle Savage, Darren Griffin, Delta Tango 6, Disco Stas Leia, DJ 420 Praise It, Eric H, FCK, Full Set, Retro Schmupper, Hausu, Ilya, Kiwi, JLab, JB RPG, Jim Knockham, Joe Angelo, John Kelly, Game Boy Guru, K2, Kikoman 589, Larridge, Malaise, Mark Toms, Megadeth 859, Minung, Mechalin, Mitch LY, Queen Charlene, Nathaniel Davis, and Electron, Neon Dagger Games, Okla Kugels, Philip Mason, Plasmo, Portal 63, Rattlecat, Raul, Rilskeen, Riff Mason, Rolf015, Scanline City, Seesaw FW, 7 Overdose, Shane Sinsansky, SLW, The Boot Rex, The Real Ikuzo, The Dirty Screech, The Old Bensta, TRM, Sugumo, Twilight EX, and Utakaya. Thanks for watching.